Good afternoon. Welcome, one and all. Glad to have you here. Okay. I will not waste a lot of time today in terms of announcements because I'm trying to cram in a 2-hour lesson into 75 minutes. So it's gonna be a little dicey. So without further ado, today let me bring it up. Today, we will be picking up from where we left off with building a scene, part number two, in which today we will be discussing tension and suspense, mainly through editing techniques. So we're going to pick up where we left off with Griffith, and then we're going to finish off Griffith, and then we're going to move forward in time, and we're going to get a little familiar with our friend Alfred Hitchcock, and we're going to talk about all these ways that you can put tension and suspense into your work, into your films, how you can get the audience to be at the edge of their seat as they are watching your movie. So good stuff today, and a lot to cover. So strap in, folks, because it's going to get real. All right, so for starters, a very quick moment of review. As you may recall, we discussed film language the other day. This is a continuation of that lesson. So we discussed film language the other day. We talked about the importance of establishing a scene. We talked about how you want your audience to identify with characters. Remember, we did that primarily through the use of close-ups, right? Introducing your characters by establishing that scene and then showing the close-ups to help your audience identify with those characters. And that can help your audience feel the correct emotions. Remember, great filmmakers are great manipulators. I've said it many times before. Getting your audience to feel the correct emotion in any given scene is important, and you can do that through the use of film language. We also talked about the suspension of disbelief, as you may recall. The idea that you are creating this world and you want your audience to believe in that world and to pretend with you that this movie is actually real life. The idea that you're going to suspend their disbelief and maintaining that illusion of a world that doesn't actually exist, but we want to believe it actually exists, and we're willing to pretend that it actually exists and that what this character is going through is real. Okay, we also discussed Griffith's pattern, which hopefully you got some experience and some practice working with. So Griffith's pattern, we talked about the establishing shot and the importance of that to introduce a setting. We talked about the long shot and how you use that to set the scene. We talked about medium shots to how to introduce characters that are in that scene. And then we talked about the close-ups that help build that character and build the emotional connection between that character and your audience. So that's our little bit of review. We're going to continue now with Griffith and some other techniques that he discovered and developed as he was creating his films. And one of the things that he discovered was that he could change the feeling and emotion of his films by changing the way he worked in post-production. So in our previous lesson, we talked a lot about Griffith moving the camera around, getting the wide shot, getting the medium shot, getting the close-up, following that pattern, right? What Griffith also discovered was that he could use different techniques when editing his film in order to create certain feelings and emotions, and that it had different effects on the audience. Now, remember, previous to Griffith, right, most films were just 15 minutes long, and they were the length of one film reel. They weren't moving the camera around a whole lot, and they weren't cutting up the film a whole lot and pasting it together. Griffith sort of pioneered this idea of making something longer, cutting up the film, editing the film, putting different shots next to other different shots to help create a feeling, an emotion. So Griffith discovered that how he paced those cuts, okay, could change the feeling. So a faster tempo in editing, okay, a faster tempo created drama and excitement. We typically associate speed with excitement, right? So if your cuts in your film are going super, super fast, that's going to elicit an emotion in your audience of excitement or drama. Right? On the other hand, a slower tempo is going to create a more static feeling or maybe a sense of awkwardness. So for example, if two of you were out on a first date and I was going to film and capture this beautiful, historic, romantic moment between the two of you, right? I'd set up the camera and I'd film the two of you on your first date. And if I wanted to capture the awkwardness of that, then maybe I would leave the camera there and I would not cut or edit it at all. I just let that shot play out. And that would be really awkward, right? Because it's like staring at something too long, right? It becomes uncomfortable. Right? And that would be a good way for my audience to feel the awkwardness or the uncomfortable nature of that scene, if that was something that I wanted to do. On the other hand, if it was something very exciting, we're in a car race or something like that, I would cut very, very quickly to help the audience feel the speed and the emotion and the excitement of that car race. So how you edit your film has just as much effect on how you on your audience's emotion and feeling as the way that you place your camera shots. Okay. And this was something that Griffith started to discover and that he experimented with. And this developed into sort of our modern day film language. Okay. I'm going to show you a clip now from Griffith's film. So you may remember the opening scene of this. This is Way Down East. So we watched the opening couple of scenes the other day in which we are following Griffith's pattern. You remember this is the story about Lillian Gish, her name is Anna in the film. And she is very, very poor and destitute, you remember, and then she went to go seek financial aid from her relatives in Boston, I think it was. And then we met the bad guy, the nefarious bad guy whose specialties were ladies, and more ladies. Remember that? We all hissed at him, and we thought he was a horrible, horrible person. This is the climax of that film. So to give you some context, Anna, Lillian Gish's character, Anna, was kind of suckered in by that horrible, nefarious character whose specialties are ladies, and more ladies. He basically pretended to marry her because he's a horrible guy. And then he left her and abandoned her and just kind of threw her away. And poor Anna became pregnant as a result from that relationship. And now she's without husband and she's pregnant, which in this day and age is a very big scandal, right? A very horrible thing to her reputation and to who she is. How is she going to help? How is she going to take care of this child? She has no husband, so on and so forth. Big, big problems here. She finds some peace with a family that kind of takes care of her. And there's a lovely young man who kind of likes her and starts to take a kin to her. And there's perhaps a blooming relationship there. And then, lo and behold, our evil, dark, nefarious character comes back. He's comes over like for dinner, basically. And it's awkward and it's tense because no one knows what's going on. And then finally the truth comes out. And poor Anna, in her despair, in her anguish of the scandal of it all, thrusts herself out into the wilderness because she's so upset and beside herself. She races out into the storm. It's a horrible storm. And her life is in grave danger because she's lost out in this horrible, horrible winter storm. It's very, very cold. Meanwhile, our hero decides that our evildoer is a bad guy, and they get into a nice little set of fisticuffs, and that's fun. And then he's going to go out, and our hero is going to go out and try to save Anna from the dangers of the storm, the dangers of the snow. So that's the context, so you know what's going on. And here we go. What'd you think?
She should have been dead like an hour ago.
You think?
Yes.
That was really stressful.
She was just rolling around.
Okay, wait. Who said that was really stressful?
Me.
Who's
Chloe.
me? Where are you?
Hi.
Hi, Chloe. That was really stressful. Why was that really stressful?
Well, because there was you thought every stress point was gonna be the climax of the film, but then it kind of lulled down.
It
And it's
just kept going.
the ice is breaking. But
Yeah.
like, you know, she's like, that's not her, that's her coat, you know? And then, you know, it was just like building and building in this way where it wasn't like directly like climaxing. It was just kind of like jagged growth in the stress. And that was really interesting, but also like really, really good. It was like
Yeah.
you had your attention.
It had your attention. This is a silent film, folks. This is a silent film from 1920. We're watching it in 2020. That's a long time later, 100 years later, and it's still pretty good. Like, it still holds up. Like, that climactic scene is like, that's you know, stressful or tension or suspenseful or interesting or exciting, right? And this was kind of new to the time. And Griffith had done this with his previous film, and he dabbled with it in some of his other works. But this was kind of when film language kind of started to take off in this way, because we were able to use editing techniques to kind of create a feeling of excitement and suspense. Remember, before they started making narrative films like this, movies were novelties. It was just, look at the new technology. Let's look at the moving pictures, right? Like, that's so cool, right? And now it's like you got people sitting there like super stressed and excited and invested in what's going on in the film. Now, this is 1920. How do you think they filmed that in 1920? Like, how do you think?
I was gonna ask that question.
Okay, well, what do you think?
Well, it looked like they actually went out in the storm and like actually like put her on the ice, but I don't know. I have no idea.
They just put her on a block of ice.
Well, I mean, like, it's the 1920s. Like, I don't know how advanced.
Yeah, people aren't smart in the 1920s, right?
No, they're not smart, but I don't know how advanced like props and stuff and like sets and stuff.
Okay,
were,
what do you
know?
guys think? How do you think they did this in 1920?
I feel like it were just sound stages and miniatures
Okay.
that could have gotten that, because there wasn't enough detail to be able to tell what it was in. Maybe a few shots were like actually outside and stuff.
I mean, it is
So,
a
like, the
black and white
waterfall, I
film,
think,
right? You can probably get away with a lot in a black and white film, right? Other ideas? What do you guys think? How did they do this?
I thought maybe like they put her in like in a pool with like styrofoam, like I don't know if styrofoam existed back then, but
Yeah, matter, yeah.
yeah.
Maybe they
I
just
don't know.
made like floaty things of ice or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Did they have stunt people? Because I think normal actors would have fallen and died.
That's a good point, right? All right. So maybe there was some people that were paid extra to be stunt people. You don't want to jeopardize your famous actress Lillian Gish, right? I mean, she's a national treasure, right? We don't want to jeopardize her. Any other ideas? These are good ideas, good possibilities.
Did they like get shots of like a waterfall or something and then film the rest of it like on a normal river?
I think for the shots of the waterfall, that was probably like filmed in a separate location, like nowhere near where the actors actually were.
Okay. That's true, actually. That part is true. That was Niagara Falls. They just kind of popped in that one waterfall. But there was like a smaller waterfall, right? Like they had like a couple smaller ones there. Any other ideas? I mean, it's a climactic scene, right? It holds up pretty well, I think, right? It's pretty exciting. Like, even by today's standards, like the speed and the tempo and the editing of it, like imagine this in 1920. Like, this was blowing people's minds, right? Like, this was super exciting. No one had ever seen anything like this before. I mean, this is amazing stuff. I mean, this whole race out onto the ice, and then there's a woman out there on the ice in the middle of the river and all this kind of stuff. Phenomenal stuff. And to think about how they did this in 1920, I mean, that is pretty impressive. So I'm sure you're all very curious. How, Mr. Taylor, how did they film this in 1920? Please let us know. Tell us the answer. Well, I'm so very glad you asked, because I will tell you the answer. And the answer is, it's real, folks. This is the real deal. That is a real river with real blocks of ice, with real actors and actresses, no stunt doubles, no special effects. It is exactly what it pertains to be. A deadly river of ice flows. Okay? Very exciting stuff. So here we have a quote. I'm going to read you a quote by the actress Lillian Gish, reflecting on this experience about filming this very famous what they now call the ice slow scene, right? And so she's reflecting on this experience, and there's a quote here that I'm going to read from where she talks about what this was like and how this worked. And it says, quote, Mr. Griffith intended to shoot all the exterior scenes outdoors, including the blizzard. He wouldn't be satisfied with the fake fury of a studio storm, right? So Griffith wanted the real deal. He didn't want fake looking snow. He didn't want studio snow. He didn't want to shoot it on a backlot. He wanted the real deal, okay? For the climax of the movie, where Anna was to be driven out into the blizzard, stumble onto the river's ice, and faint, I tried to get into condition early with exercise, walks in winter gales, and cold baths. Okay, so here's Lillian Gish like trying to gear up and get ready for this, right? Commitment to the role, all right? Our house was near the studio, and I was to report for work at any hour that snow started to fall, as we had both day and night scenes to film. It was late. It was a late but severe winter. Even Long Island Sound was frozen over. I slept with one eye open, waiting for the blizzard. Winter dragged on and was almost over, and still those important scenes hadn't been filmed. The blizzard finally struck in March. Drifts 8 feet high swallowed the studio. The trees on Orienta Point lashed the sky and groaned as the chains that held them together were stretched taut. Mr. Griffith, Billy, she's talking about Billy Bitzer, Griffith's cameraman, the staff and the assistant directors stood with their backs to the gale, bundled up in coats, mufflers, hats, and gloves. To hold the camera upright, 3 men lay on the ground, gripping the tripod legs. A small fire burned directly beneath the camera to keep the oil from freezing. I love that little added detail. All right. They had to build a fire underneath the camera to make sure the camera wouldn't freeze. Remember, this is not a digital camera, right? They had to manually crank the film through the camera. If it froze, you couldn't turn the crank and your film was ruined. So they had a little camera and 3 guys holding down the camera, and then a fire going to make sure that the thing didn't freeze, okay? But it gets better. It gets better. Again and again, I struggled through the storm. Once I fainted, and it wasn't in the script. I was hauled to the studio on a sled, thawed out with hot tea, and then brought back to the blizzard, where the others were waiting. We filmed all day and all night, stopping only to eat, standing near a bonfire. We never went inside, even for a short warm-up. The torture of returning to the cold wasn't worth the temporary warmth. The blizzard never slackened. At one point, the camera froze. There was an excruciating delay as the men, huddled against the wind, tried to get another fire started. At one time, my face was caked with a crust of ice and snow, and icicles like little spikes formed on my eyelashes, making it difficult to keep my eyes open. But it gets better. Above the howling storm, Mr. Griffith shouted, "Billy, move in, get that face, get that face." "I will," Billy shouted, "if the oil doesn't freeze in the camera." We lost several members of our crew from pneumonia as the result of exposure. Though he worked with his back to the wind, whenever possible, Mr. Griffith's face froze. His face froze. A trained nurse was at his side for the rest of the blizzard and the winter scenes. But it gets better. The scenes on and around the ice were filmed at White River Junction, Vermont, where the White River and the Connecticut flowed side by side. The ice was thick. It had to be either sawed or dynamited so that there would be flows for each day's filming. The temperature never rose above 0 during the 3 weeks we worked there. For the scene in which Anna faints on the ice floe, I thought of a piece of business. Business is an industry term for giving the actor something to do in the scene, something meaningless to play with or something like that. I thought of a piece of business and suggested it to Mr. Griffith, who agreed it was a fine idea. I was always having bright ideas and suffering for them. I suggested that my hand and my hair trail in the water as I lay on the floe that was drifting towards the falls. Mr. Griffith was delighted with the effect. After a while, my hair froze, and I felt as if my hand were in a flame. To this day, it aches if I am out in the cold for very long. When the sequence was finally finished, I had been on a slab of ice at least 20 times a day for 3 weeks. In between takes, one of the men would throw a coat around me and I would warm myself briefly at a fire. Huh. So there you go, folks. So there you go. It's all real. It's all 100% authentic. This is a real ice flow scene on a real river, putting their lives on the line for the sake of their art form. And this is the point, that I want to make. Okay, this is 1920. Okay, long before a lot of the special effects that we would think to use for stuff like this. This is 1920. But Mr. Griffith, says Lillian Gish, Mr. Griffith would not be satisfied with the fake fury of a studio storm. It was realism at all costs. They were going to do, these artists, these creatives, these directors and actors and actresses were going to do whatever it took to get that shot so that they could film what they needed to film to tell the story and to convey the emotions that they were trying to convey. This is artistic integrity. They had a creative vision, and nothing was going to stand in the way of completing that creative vision. They got the shot. Okay? There will come a time in your life as a filmmaker when you'll be left with a choice to get the shot or to take the easy road. I am here to tell you to get the shot. Okay? Get the shot. Have some creative, artistic integrity as an artist. How important is your film to you? Okay? This is what filmmaking is. You put everything out into it. You leave everything on the table. You put your heart, your soul, your blood, sweat, and tears into your films. Okay? You will be left with this choice. Are you going to get the shot? Are you going to go the extra mile? Oh, but it's hard. Yes, it's hard. Filmmaking will demand everything from you. Okay? Are you going to get the shot, or will you take the easy road? This is what separates filmmakers from people who dream of being filmmakers. Okay? Now, I'm not saying put your lives in danger. I'm not saying do anything stupid. Okay? This is my disclaimer. Okay? Please be smart. Please be careful. People have died trying to get the shot. It has happened. It has happened. Okay? Obviously, we don't want any of that to happen to any of our filmmakers. Okay? So be smart. Be careful. Don't put your life at risk. Don't do anything stupid trying to get the shot. Don't get arrested, in which case I will deny having known you completely. Okay? All right? But get the shot. Have some integrity as an artist. Okay? You will be left with this choice to go the extra mile and to get that shot, or to take the easy road. And it happens to every filmmaker over and over and over again. And it's up to you to decide what kind of a filmmaker you want to be. So here's a fun example. So I have many examples of getting the shot in my life because it happens all the time. But here's one fun example that I think you might enjoy. Years ago, I was teaching, before freestyle, I was teaching at a private school, and in the after-school programs, I created a movie-making club. It was great. It paid my rent. It was awesome. I had all these little 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders who stayed after school to learn how to make movies with me, and it was awesome. And towards the end of the year, as the school year was winding down, we decided we would all make a movie together. So we made this premise of a teacher, myself, who was at the front of the room, and every time the teacher turned around, the kids would just go crazy and go nuts, and the teacher was totally oblivious. Super simple film, really easy. We filmed it in a day, and it was something that we could all kind of have together at the end of the school year for my little movie-making club of about 20 students or so. So I'm filming with this group of 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and I'm telling them with my camera, okay, this is the part where you're all going to go crazy. You're going to go crazy. And so I said, okay, ready and action, go crazy. And they're all sitting there in their desks and they're going, yeah. I'm like, okay, that's good. That's fine. All right. Not bad. But I really need you to go crazy. I want you to go crazy. And so, okay, action. So, oh, yeah. And they're waving their arms and they're sitting in their desks and they're waving their arms and making noise. And I say, cut. And I say, guys, I need you to go buck wild. I need you to go as crazy as you possibly can. We're making a movie here. People need to believe it. All right. This is the whole joke. I want you guys to go so crazy. I remember this one kid's like, you mean like really crazy? I'm like, yes, I want you to go really, really crazy. And they're like, okay, all right. And so I said action. And when I said action, these kids went crazy. These kids went crazy. Let me show you. I have the clip here. Let me show you the final result of my movie making club going a little crazy. They went nuts. It was awesome. It was super cool. And I'm sitting there filming this. I have these two voices in my head, and one of them's like filmmaker Matt, who's like, this is awesome. This is the shot. And the other one's teacher, Mr. Taylor, who's like, this is horrible. You cannot let them do this. Obviously, filmmaker Matt won out that particular debate in my head. But it was not without consequences. That was not my classroom. That was not my students' classroom. We were just working in that particular classroom. And the next day, the teacher of that classroom and the students of that classroom were very confused by why all of the contents of their desks were located in many various different places and not where they had left them. I definitely had to write an apology note for that. But we got the shot. And that particular day, I taught my young little movie makers that it was important to have artistic integrity as an artist and to get the shot that we envisioned, to make the movie that we actually wanted to make. And there will come a time when you are left with a similar choice, to get the shot or to take the easy road. Okay, maybe getting the shot is actually getting a physical shot. Maybe getting the shot means getting a particular location. Maybe getting a shot means trying to get 100 people together for a dance scene or a concert scene or something. Right? Maybe getting the shot means figuring out the logistics of how to get these different people together at the right times and the right places. And maybe you only have one shot because you're doing this special effect and you got to get it just right. And it's the crucial moment of your film. Okay? Whatever it is, get the shot. In filmmaking and in life, whatever it is, get the shot. Don't take the easy road. You'll be happier with yourself and you will grow more as a filmmaker and a person if you challenge yourself. Okay? You can do it. You'll get stuff done. Okay, so coming back to Mr. Griffith here. So we talked about that Mr. Griffith discovered that how he paced the cuts could change the feeling. So in that particular ice flow scene, he's cutting quick. He's cutting quick. This is 1920. That was super fast for film in 1920. By today's standards, it's still not slow. But in 1920, that was blazing fast, okay? And that created a sense of excitement, of drama, so on and so forth for that very, very famous scene out on the ice floes. Now, you can do this with your films. Many filmmakers today have used this same example and developed this film language to create further moments of excitement and drama. So here, for example, is a scene from one of my favorite movies. This is Back to the Future #3, Back to the Future Part 3. How many of you have seen the Back to the Futures? Anyone? Anyone? Good, good, good. Someone, oh dear. Some of you are not raising your hands and I'm judging you. Okay, all right. So Back to the Future, great film, wonderful movie. I just got it in 4K HDR. It came out again in a couple weeks ago. I'm very excited. This is a scene from Back to the Future Part 3. Very exciting scene. This is the train scene. As you watch this particular scene, it's easy to get sucked into the excitement of the scene, but I don't want you to get sucked into the excitement of the scene. I want you, as filmmakers, to analyze this scene as we are watching it. I want you to pay attention to how often the director, Zemeckis, makes his cuts. Okay, how quickly does he make his cuts? How fast are his shots? How quickly does he make his cuts? How often does he make his cuts in this particular scene? And pay attention to how those cuts help elicit the feeling of excitement as we watch. Okay? Here we go. I got my hoverboard. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go for this. Okay. Do you see how quickly the cuts were? Do you see how quick and like super fast, like right off the bat? Like a lot of those shots were quicker than like a second. Like quicker than a second, like super, super fast. That's a lot faster than what we saw in Griffith's movie. But remember, this is built upon a century of film language. When Griffith did it, it was blazing fast. When Zemeckis did it in that scene, that was also blazing fast, just by a different standard because we're used to it. So now we're used to seeing it. We kind of know how to pay attention and look for it. But there's a lot of excitement there, right? There's a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, and the editing style and how you choose to cut your films can elicit that emotion in your audience, which is a useful skill that you can have as a filmmaker, because again, your goal as a filmmaker is to try to get your audience to feel something, is to try to get them to feel the emotion. Okay, so this technique that we are discussing, that we are talking about, is called parallel editing. So you saw in that clip, for example, you'd see the dock, and then you'd see Clara's dress ripping, and then you'd see Marty in the car looking at the odometer, and then you'd see the fire that's growing in the engine room and all that kind of stuff. All these different things happening at the same time. This idea, this concept is called parallel editing. We also sometimes call this cross-cutting. And this is the idea or the concept that there are two scenes or two things in a scene that are happening at the same time. And this can help create tension and suspense when you do that, for example. Let's have a good example. What's a good example? So let's say, well, in this scene, it was the train as it's getting closer and closer and closer to the edge of the cliff. And then we also see the doc who's trying to save Claire, the woman, on the other side of the train, right? And they're happening at the same time. In Griffith's movie, it was Anna on the ice floe drifting closer and closer to the waterfall, the impending doom, the impending disaster, and then the hero rushing across the snow trying to get to her, cutting back and forth. So that idea that these two things are happening at the same time, even though we can't look at them at the same time, we understand that they're happening at the same time because we're cutting back and forth between the two things. And this is called parallel editing. That's called cross-cutting. And when we do that, you get a sense that these things are happening at the same time, and you can use that to help create suspense, right? Anna's about to fall over the waterfall, but then the hero is over there and he's coming. Will he get there in time? I don't know. Let's check back at the waterfall, and there's Anna. And then meanwhile, there's our hero, and then there's Anna and the hero, and you cut back and forth and see how that gets exciting, right? That we can build a drama in that way. So that adds suspense and tension to a scene. How many of you have seen the movie Inception? Inception. Okay. Good movie. This entire film is built upon this concept of parallel editing, this concept of cross-cutting. If we didn't have film language, if we didn't have cross-cutting, you could not tell this story. If you think about it. So if those of you who have seen the movie, you understand what I'm talking about. Those of you who have not seen the movie, you should watch it. It's a great movie, good film, makes you think a little bit. You'll enjoy it. Whoa! the whole idea of this movie and the way that it's displayed is all done with cross-cutting. Scenes that we understand are taking place at the same time. And we cut back and forth between all these different scenes. And sometimes it's layers of scenes in Inception, right? Layers of scenes. And then we understand how they affect each other in different ways. You couldn't tell this story without film language. You couldn't tell this story without cross-cutting. And it's a great way to elicit tension and suspense. And check out the movie if you haven't. It's a fun movie. You'll enjoy it. Okay, your context matters. Just like we talked about in our previous lesson with context, okay? The context still matters in editing, just like it does when we are shooting our scenes and shooting our angles on the film. So what clips you place next to which clips can have a dramatic effect on your meaning, a huge effect on your meaning. So here is an interview with Mr. Alfred Hitchcock. We're now going to transition into some more modern day filmmakers. This is Alfred Hitchcock, a great filmmaker and the master of suspense, the master of tension and suspense. Nobody did it better than Alfred Hitchcock. And he just took Griffith's film language and just kept moving with it, kept pushing it more and more and more, and taking it to new levels to create emotion and feeling in audience members. So in this particular interview, there's this guy who's like kind of a brown noser. And he's like interviewing him, and Hitchcock is going to answer some questions about editing and about cutting up film and how that can be effective. So take a look at this particular piece, and we're going to learn a few things from Mr. Hitchcock here.
We call it cutting. It isn't exactly that. Cutting implies severing something. It really should be called assembly. Mosaic is assembling something to create a whole. Montage means the assembly of pieces of film which, moved in rapid succession before the eye, create an idea. Of course, the most elementary form is the juxtaposition of imagery in various sizes. You know, a lot of people think that cutting is, or we'll say montage or assembly, is taking a man from one place to another and jumping into a close-up of him, which Griffith invented, it's true. But to me it goes much deeper. And as I say, the picture Psycho contained quite an amount of cinematic approach to this, to its basic content. In the first place, we had in it the murder of a woman in a shower, of a nude woman. Now, as you know, you could not take the camera and just show a nude woman being stabbed to death. It had to be done impressionistically. So it was done with little pieces of film. The head, the feet, the hand, the parts of the torso.
Shadow on the curtain.
Everything, you see, was used. The shower itself. I think in that scene there were 78 pieces of film in about 45 seconds. Now that's one kind. Now we'll take another kind, which I would prefer to call, say, the orchestration. Loud notes, soft notes, and so forth. The second murder in Psycho was treated quite differently. It showed a detective coming up the stairs, the audience already aware that a monster was around. So they were apprehensive for him, but they didn't know when it was going to happen. So I have this man mounting the stairs in what we would call a medium shot, a waist shot. And he gets to the top of the stairs. Then I take the camera and put it very, very high. Way, way high. Above the ceiling, almost. As though we're looking down on the whole thing. And a little figure runs out with a raised knife. And the hand goes up with the knife into the air and starts to bring it down. Now remember, these are two tiny figures. Then the next cut is a big head of the man as the knife goes across his face. Now, this is size of image put together to create shock. In other words, if it were music, it would be tremolos on the violin and suddenly a brass instrument, which is the big close-up. And from that he fell and went back. So there's an illustration of using the size of the image to create shock, or whatever you will. Now the third way is what one might call pure cinematics, the assembly of film, and how it can be changed to create a different idea. Now we have a close-up. Let me show what he sees. Let's assume he saw a woman holding a baby in her arms. Now we cut back to his reaction to what he sees, and he smiles. Now what is he as a character? He's a kindly man. He's sympathetic. Now, let's take the middle piece of film away, the woman with the child, but leave his two pieces of film as they were. Now we'll put in a piece of film of a girl in a bikini. He looks, girl in a bikini, he smiles. What is he now? The dirty old man. He's no longer the benign gentleman who loves babies. That's the difference. That's what film can do for you.
Or you for it, as it were.
I like that example that Hitchcock gives. It just makes it really, really clear what a difference the context can make. Those two clips of Hitchcock were exactly the same, of him looking and him smiling, but they sure seem different, don't they? They sure feel different just because of that middle piece of film. So the context really makes a huge difference. This is true in all types of media, not just film. How you selectively choose your clips or edit them together can drastically change the meaning that people will derive from watching it. So it's a very, very powerful tool to elicit the type of emotion and feeling that you want. Okay. Another principle that we are going to discuss is this idea of show and don't tell. You're going to hear me say this a lot over the next couple of years. Show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. Get it into your head now, because this is a principle of film that becomes very, very useful in all types of filmmaking, not just your production and not just your post-production, but also your writing as well. So get this into your head. It's always better to allow the audience to see things for themselves than it is for you to tell the audience what to think. Okay, I know filmmakers are great manipulators, But that's because we allow the audience to come to the conclusions that we want them to come to and the feelings that we want them to come to. We don't open up our film and say, you should feel sad now, right? We don't say that to the audience. That would be ineffective. In fact, it would probably be counterproductive because nobody likes being told what to do, right? The audience would be like, I'm not sad, I'm happy. Take that, filmmaker, man, right? Like that's not gonna change anything, right? So you want the audience to see things and interpret things in the way that you want them to, but you want them to allow them the opportunity to do it themselves. And the best way to do that is to show and not tell. Use visual storytelling. Show elements that are important. If an item is important and we need to see it, then we need to see it. We're going to watch an example here in a minute of a Hitchcock film where he uses a key, and the key is very important. All right? He doesn't shoot the person handing the other person the key in a wide shot. He gets an extreme close-up of that key so the audience knows, oh, this key is really important, and I see that it is being handed off. Right? So if something is important to your film, make sure that you show it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen student films where they're like, yeah, there's a back alley deal and someone's giving the other character $20. And I'm like, you know how big the $20 is on your film? It's like a centimeter on your shot because you filmed the whole thing in a wide shot. That's not very important. The $20 must not be that important. How am I supposed to know if the deal is that important, right? Like, give me the close-up if it's important. Close-ups are not just for people to get emotion. They're also for important elements of your story, right? If it's important to the story, then the audience needs to be able to see it. Is it important? Be very deliberate about what you show on camera and what you choose not to show on camera. These are conscious decisions that you need to make as a director so that your audience can interpret your film in the way that you intended them to see it, okay? And do not forget, because we just finished our experimental unit, do not forget that you can use elements of metaphor or symbolism to get different meanings and feelings and emotions into your narrative work, okay? Just because we finished the experimental unit doesn't mean that these rules don't still apply. Your use of metaphor and your use of symbolism can have powerful effects on your audience and the way that they view and interpret your film. All right, so here is a clip. So what we're going to watch here is a segment of the film Notorious. This is an Alfred Hitchcock film, stars Cary Grant, and I'll give you the premise so that you kind of understand what's going on. Cary Grant, who's this guy on the left, plays the role. He's kind of like a spy. He's kind of like a government spy. He has recruited this woman here to spy on her horrible husband, who's up to no good. And he has recruited her to spy on him, and he is meeting her here at the park, and he tells her, I want you to have a party. You need to invite me to the party. I need to get to the house, and you need to get the key to the wine cellar because I need to investigate the wine cellar. Something's going on in the wine cellar. And so she's very nervous about this, and he basically talks her into it and says, no, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it. And then so that's what's going to happen. So we're going to watch this party scene and how it unfolds.
Well, then the wine cellar's the obvious place to look.
Alex has the key to that.
And get it from him.
Get it? Yes. How?
Don't you live near him?
What do I look for if I get the key?
You look for a bottle of wine, like the one that rattled the fellow at dinner that night.
All the bottles look alike to me. I'm no mastermind.
You're doing all right.
It's no fun then.
Too late for that now, isn't it? Look, why don't you persuade your husband to throw a large shindig so that he can introduce his bride to real society, say sometime next week?
Why?
Consider me invited. And I'll try and find out about that wine cellar business.
Well, I don't think my husband is interested in entertaining just yet.
The honeymoon isn't over, huh? Don't underestimate your charms, Mrs. Sebastian. You can handle it.
I don't think it's going to be so easy about you. He thinks you're in love with me.
Well, then tell him you thought if you invited me to the house and I saw how happily married you were, then the horrid passion I have for you might be torn out of me.
That sounds very logical.
Good. Next week, then, and get the key. I have to fly up to Belen, but I'll be back in time.
All right. I'll be looking forward to seeing you.
It's always a pleasure meeting you, madame. surprised at Mr. Devlin coming tonight. I don't blame anybody for being in love with the darling. I just hope that nothing will happen to give him any false impression. I'll be within a minute. Darling. It's not that I don't trust you. When you're in love at my age, every man who looks at your woman is a menace. Please forgive me for even talking about it. I'm very contrite. Well, I think we might join the rest of the party now. I think all our guests are here. I can find Madame Sebastian. I'm at drawings. Thanks.
Hello there.
Good evening.
You haven't seen the house, have you?
Oh, it's quite a jolly little cottage.
Let me show you around the place.
Later, his nips is on the trail.
Evelyn?
Good evening.
Glad to see you.
It's kind of your bride to invite me.
We both invite you, Mr. Devlin. We'll see that our guest is fed, my dear, and amused. You know what... Oh, excuse me. Madam Esterick, I'm so glad to see you.
This isn't going to be easy.
Why?
He's quite sensitive about you. He's going to watch us like a hawk.
Yes, he's rather jealous of anyone.
Where'd you get the key? Off his chain?
Yes.
Let's hope the liquor doesn't run out and start him down the cellar for more.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Quite a point. Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Devlin, how nice you remember me.
Senor Ortiz.
How sweet. Young men usually have short memories. Oh, here's something I adore, champagne. Oh, may I?
Joseph,
Madame?
do you think you have enough champagne to last for the rest of the evening?
I don't know, Madame. I hope so.
Enjoying yourself, Mr. Devlin?
Very much, thank you.
There are so many things I would like to ask you about the States. I haven't heard anything for a long time.
I'll be glad to tell you. Will you excuse me, Senor Ortiz?
Do you mind? We better hurry.
Lots of time.
No, Joseph might have to ask Alex for more wine.
Uh-huh.
He's running out faster than he thought.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is he watching?
Yes. You better go out in the garden alone and wait around the back of the house for me, and I'll show you the wine cellar door.
Nice party, isn't it?
It's a wonderful party.
I think you've done it wonderfully well. I'm very proud. Mr. Devlin bother you much?
Oh, no, darling. He's trying to drown his sorrow.
Moi, je n'oublierai jamais, jamais ma première chasse. Figurez-vous que mon père des amis m'avait invité à une chasse au sanglier. Et c'était la première fois. Je ne savais plus me contenir. Les chasseurs l'entourèrent. Quant à moi, pris de je ne sais quoi, d'une joie indescriptible, je me mis à courir contre les ordres donnés.
Excuse me. I think I'll ask the orchestra to play some Brazilian music. They've played waltzes all evening.
Oh, my dear.
Je disais donc, je crois depuis 5 minutes.
I'll keep the garden door open and I'll tell you if anything happens.
Vintage sand. We've got to leave things as we found them. Help me find a bottle of wine with the same label as these others.
But it isn't really sand, is it?
I think it's some kind of metal ore. This is a bit weird.
I'm terrified.
I did pretend you were a janitor. Janitors are never terrified.
I have a feeling we're very slow.
Oh, we're on schedule. Take it easy.
I keep hearing someone coming.
Oh, that'll be nice.
Think if he comes down with Joseph.
It's unfortunate.
Someone is coming. It's Alex. He's seen us.
So very, very exciting, and it's worth watching in its entirety. I think you'll find that it's more interesting and also is full of suspense and tension. And again, Hitchcock uses metaphor and symbolism to do this. So the key, for example, that key isn't just a key to the cellar. It really represents the wife's betrayal, right? It represents the secret, right? And so that key has a lot more meaning when it's there in her hand and the husband doesn't realize it, right? Like it's a symbol of the wife's betrayal of her husband. And all those wine bottles, as I mentioned, really signify the passage of time and the husband's discovery of what's going on, the impending discovery. When that wine runs out, we know he's coming downstairs. And if Cary Grant is still there, that's trouble. So Hitchcock uses cross-cutting back and forth between the party scene and how many bottles of wine are left, and Cary Grant in the basement trying to clean up the mess that he made and everything else. And there's a lot of tension and suspense as those two things get closer and closer and closer together. Take a look at this clip that has some interviews of directors that kind of talk about this particular scene and how effective it is.
Wonderful visual touch, and he uses it very, very effectively in this film.
De temps en temps, il fait un truc très astucieux que j'ai piqué à mort. Il fait un truc très astucieux, c'est d'utiliser ces objets, ces objets signes, comme signes d'éléments de l'intrigue, pas de l'intérieur des personnages, de l'intrigue. À partir du moment où le spectateur est habitué à ce que l'objet ait un rôle dans l'intrigue, un rôle souligné dans l'intrigue, il finit par comprendre que parfois, quand ça n'est pas dans l'intrigue, ça doit bien vouloir signifier quelque chose ailleurs.
Within a minute.
Darling. It's not that I don't trust you. But when you're in love at my age, every man who looks at you, woman, is a menace. Will you forgive me for even talking about it? I'm very contrite.
Really what he's doing in all his films is teaching us how to look, shaping our gaze, and he's teaching us to see things that are they're like clues, but they're more like incriminating elements and things that someone is guilty to possess because they give away so much. He's wonderful at finding those things in natural behavior and just exaggerating them a little bit.
I love this. His description of going into for the key to the wine cellar. They built an elaborate wooden crane in order to make the camera come down to that key in her hand. And I asked him why he'd gone to such lengths to do that shot. I mean, it could have been done a number of different ways. You could just show a wide shot and cut in closer and then cut to the hand. I mean, could have been done very simply other ways, but why did he do it that way? He said, well, that's a cinematic way of saying in this great party, this great hall with a lot of people, a lot of hubbub, the whole thing comes down to a small key in somebody's hand. So it's a way of visually saying that. It's like a paragraph in a story, in one shot. It's a model of filmmaking, storytelling in movies. It's an exceptional shot because it gives you suspense, because the fact that the camera is moving, even though the audience perhaps isn't conscious, they're aware that something's happening and they're being taken somewhere for a purpose.
One of the most essential things in a film is visual clarity. I think an audience should be given all the facts. For example, if you take suspense, suspense can only be achieved by telling the audience as much as you can. I don't deal in mystery. I never make whodunits.
No.
Because they're intellectual exercises. You're just wondering. You're not emoting.
Okay. So a lot of good examples and some interesting insights in that particular set of interviews. I love the visual elements that Bogdanovich talks about, where he says it's a model of filmmaking. The whole party, the whole thing comes down to a woman's key, in the palm of her hand. I think that's really interesting and kind of cool. Okay, which brings us to the last final point that I'll make very, very quickly because I know we're out of time. And that is the concept of privileged position. Basically, this is the principle of placing your audience in a position in which they know things that the characters do not. So, for example, the audience knows in that Hitchcock scene that the key is in the palm of the woman's hand. The audience knows that. The husband does not. And so that helps create a moment of tension and suspense. This is also every horror movie ever, right? Where the monster is in the closet or the monster is around the corner and the girl is walking down the hallway towards the corner or towards the closet, and we're all screaming at her, "Don't go over there, you idiot. What are you doing? Don't you know there's a monster right over there?" Well, no, she doesn't know that the monster is right over there. But you know that the monster is right over there, and that's why you get to feel all the suspense and all the tension, because you, the audience, are in privileged position. Okay, and this is a tool that you can use to get your audience to feel tension and suspense by placing them in a position, by giving them information so that they know things that the characters in the film do not. Basically, Hitchcock talks about this concept in which he says, for example, pretend there's some people sitting around at a table. They're all talking about baseball, and there's a bomb under the table, and the bomb blows up, and they're all dead. He says, well, what does that give you? Well, it gives you like 5 or 10 seconds of shock.
4 people are sitting around a table talking about baseball, whatever you like. 5 minutes of it, very dull. Suddenly, a bomb goes off, blows the people to smithereens. What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock. Now take the same scene and tell the audience there is a bomb under that table and will go off in 5 minutes. Well, the whole emotion of the audience is totally different because you've given them that information that in 5 minutes' time that bomb will go off. Now the conversation about baseball becomes very vital because they're saying to you, don't be ridiculous, stop talking about baseball, there's a bomb under there. You've got the audience working. Now the only difference is, although I've been guilty of, in the picture Sabotage, of making this error, but I've never made it since, the bomb must never go off. Because if you do, you work that audience into a state, and then they'll get angry because you haven't provided them with any relief. And that's almost a must. So a foot touches the bomb, somebody looks down and says, my God, a bomb, out of the window, then it goes off, just in time.
Okay, now take the same scene, he says, take the same scene, but show the audience the bomb under the table and the clock ticking, and it's got 30 seconds to go off. Now, all of a sudden, instead of 5 seconds of shock, the audience has 30 seconds of suspense, 30 seconds of tension as they're watching the clock get closer and closer, and they're all going crazy because these people are sitting around just having a quiet conversation around the table, talking about baseball. And there's so much suspense and tension because of that. And he says, well, 30 seconds of tension and suspense is a lot better than 5 seconds of shock, right? Because you can stretch your audience. You can really make them feel a lot and emote a lot and have those feelings and emotions. And that's really cool. Which brings us to your assignment. You have an assignment. And the assignment is, in a new group of 3, you're going to work with new people that you have not worked with before. I think we can do that still. In a new group of 3, you're going to create, using film language, a scene that successfully creates tension. I call this the suspension scene because it's suspense and tension all rolled into one. Okay? Use all of the elements that we talked about today. Use cross-cutting or show, don't tell, privileged position. Change your tempo in editing to create meaning, tension, and feeling. And that is your assignment. It is due by Thursday. So you've got today, you've got tomorrow, you've got Wednesday, which is a holiday this week. Go team. And you've got all those days to put it together and then have it for class on Thursday. We want to turn it in on Thursday. If there's time, we'll watch them in class. I don't know if there will be time. We're just going to have to wait and see. But they need to be ready in the Google Drive Dropbox before Thursday. If we were meeting in class, this is something that we would do in class. So you don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this. It shouldn't take you that long to create something and film it. This is not a big film. You're not making something that's several minutes long. You're just creating a scene that has tension and suspense. So don't go overboard and spend too much time on this. But you have a few days when normally you only have like an hour. You have a few days to create something kind of fun. So if you would like to get the shot and go the extra mile and have some fun with this, by all means do so, but don't make something that's terribly, terribly long or that demands too much of your time, because you want to have this done and ready for class by the time we meet again on Thursday. Are there any questions? You have been delightful class today. I apologize that I crammed so much content into 75 minutes. I will have this material uploaded to my YouTube channel later on today, hopefully. So if you want to review it at a later time and take a little more time or watch all of the clips in their entirety, it will be there for your viewing pleasure. Otherwise, I will see you on Thursday. Thank you. I will see you later this week. So long. Farewell.